I'm Nance, 28, and I just watched my mother forge my signature on a six-figure bank transfer while pressing her nails deep enough into my thigh to leave crescent-shaped marks. The crazy part? She was smiling the entire time. I sat there frozen as she sweetly told the bank manager, "Just sign it, dear," while her fingers dug into my flesh like a warning. But here's what she didn't know. I had been recording everything. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt manipulated by someone you trusted. You'll definitely want to stick around for what happened next. Let me back up and tell you how I ended up in that chair, watching my own mother try to steal my inheritance. It all started 1 month ago when Dad died unexpectedly from a heart attack. I was living in Portland, working as a freelance graphic designer, finally building something for myself after years of family drama. Dad and I had our issues, sure, but he was the only one who ever believed in me. Mom called me at midnight sobbing, "Nance, honey, your father, he's gone." I caught the first flight home to Phoenix, my heart shattered and my mind racing. The funeral was a blur of casseroles and condolences, but one thing stood out crystal clear: the reading of Dad's will. He had left me $50,000 and his vintage car collection, cars he knew I loved because we used to work on them together in the garage when I was a kid. My brother Derek, who's 31, got the house and Mom got everything else, including Dad's life insurance. It seemed fair enough, until I saw Mom's face when the lawyer read my portion. She looked like someone had slapped her. "50,000? She whispered, then louder. "Harold left that girl $50,000 for what? She hasn't visited in 2 years. The lawyer cleared his throat uncomfortably. Mom continued her performance. "Derek has been here every Sunday, helping with yard work, being a good son. And she gets money for what? Drawing pictures?" Derek just sat there nodding along like the spineless mama's boy he'd always been. 31 years old and still living in Mom's basement, but somehow he was the golden child because he never left Phoenix. That night, Mom cornered me in my childhood bedroom. "Nance, sweetheart, I've been thinking. Maybe it would be better if you let me invest that money for you. You know how unpredictable freelance work can be." She'd been getting detailed updates about my life from my cousin Amy, who worked at a marketing firm in Portland and knew people in my industry. I could put it in a CD, something safe and steady. I told her I'd think about it, but honestly, something felt off. The way she'd reacted at the lawyer's office, the sudden concern for my financial future, it didn't add up. Mom had never cared about my money before because I'd never had any. The next morning, she was different. Sweet as pie, making my favorite breakfast, asking about my work in Portland. "You know, honey, maybe you should move back home. Derek could use the company, and housing is so expensive everywhere else." Derek looked up from his cereal and nodded enthusiastically. Of course he did. But here's the thing. I wasn't the same scared little girl who used to hide in her room when Mom went on her rampages. Portland had changed me. I had friends there, clients who respected my work, a life that was mine. And now I had Dad's gift, his way of saying he was proud of what I'd built. "Thanks, but I like my life in Portland," I said, watching her smile tighten just slightly around the edges. That's when I knew something was really wrong. Mom's manipulation tactics started the very next day, and honestly, they were so obvious I almost laughed. Almost. She began with guilt trips about family loyalty and moved on to subtle threats about my questionable lifestyle choices in Portland. Translation: I was dating women, and she'd never fully accepted that. "Your father would want you to be smart with his gift," she said over breakfast, stirring her coffee with the kind of intensity that meant business. "He worked so hard for that money. Gambling it away on some apartment in the big city would just break his heart. Gambling it away." Right, because paying rent and building a life was gambling. Derek chimed in with his usual brilliance. "Mom's right, Nance. Remember when you bought that car in college and it broke down? You're not exactly Warren Buffett. The car that broke down because it was 15 years old and I could only afford $1,500 for transportation. But sure, Derek, that makes me financially irresponsible." What really got under my skin was how she kept bringing up Portland like it was some kind of mistake. "That city is so expensive, honey. And those people you're living around? Are they really your kind of people?" "My kind of people." She meant gay people, liberal people, people who didn't think I should apologize for existing. By day 3, she wasn't even trying to be subtle anymore. She'd positioned herself as the victim in this scenario, crying actual tears about how worried she was about my future. "I just don't want you to end up alone and broke. Sweetheart, women your age need security, need to think about settling down." The settling down comment was rich, coming from someone whose idea of a stable relationship was staying married to a man she complained about for 35 years. But I bit my tongue because we were supposed to be grieving Dad, not fighting about my life choices. Then came the research phase. Mom suddenly became very interested in my daily routine, asking detailed questions about my work schedule, my lease agreement, my savings account. She knew more than she should have. Cousin Amy had been feeding her information about Portland's cost of living, my industry's typical rates, even details about my apartment that I'd never shared. Just curious, she'd say with that fake sweet smile. I want to understand your life better. Derek was her little spy too, asking me questions that felt suspiciously like the ones Mom had been asking. So like, do you have a roommate? Must be expensive living alone. And you freelance, right? That must be unpredictable income-wise. I started paying attention to their conversations when they thought I wasn't listening. Hushed voices in the kitchen after dinner. Sudden silence when I walked into a room. Phone calls that ended abruptly when I appeared. Something was definitely brewing, and I had a sick feeling it involved my inheritance. The breaking point came on day 5. I was packing to return to Portland when Mom made her move. She sat on my bed, watching me fold clothes with this sad, martyred expression. Nance, I need to tell you something. Derek and I have been talking and we're worried about you taking that money to Oregon. She paused for dramatic effect. There are people there who might take advantage of someone like you. Someone like me. What exactly do you mean by that, Mom? Well, you know, young women, especially ones who are different. They can be targets for scammers. And with your lifestyle, honey, you're not exactly thinking clearly about long-term stability. There it was. The real reason she wanted control of my money. She thought being gay made me incapable of making rational decisions. Like my sexuality somehow affected my ability to understand basic math. I zipped up my suitcase and looked her straight in the eye. I'm taking Dad's money, Mom. It's mine, and I'm going to use it to build something real in Portland. End of discussion. Her sweet mask finally slipped. Fine, but don't come crying to me when you blow through it all and need help. But I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The phone calls started the moment I got back to Portland. At first, they were just Mom checking in, asking how I was adjusting back to my routine. Sweet, concerned, totally normal. Then they got weird. Honey, I was talking to my financial advisor about your situation, she said during call number 3. He mentioned that inheritance money can be really tricky tax-wise if you don't handle it properly. You could end up owing a lot more than you think. I'd already looked into the tax implications. Dad had structured everything to minimize what I'd owe, but Mom didn't need to know I'd done my homework. I let her think I was clueless, curious to see where this was heading. Maybe you should talk to a professional before you do anything hasty, she continued. I could set up a meeting with our guy. He's helped our family for years. Their guy. The same financial advisor who'd helped Derek lose $5,000 in some cryptocurrency scam last year. No thanks. But I played along. That sounds like a good idea, Mom. I want to be smart about this. I could practically hear her smiling through the phone. Wonderful. I'll call him tomorrow and see when he can fit us in. Maybe you could fly back next weekend? Us. Interesting. That's when I decided to do some investigating of my own. I called the law office that had handled Dad's will and asked some questions about the inheritance process. The paralegal was helpful, confirming what I already knew. The money was mine, no strings attached, and Mom had no legal right to make decisions about it. But then she mentioned something that made my blood run cold. Your mother did call asking about the timeline for the transfer and whether there were any complications with your portion specifically. Mom had called the lawyer's office, without telling me. That was definitely not normal grieving widow behavior. I started documenting everything, screenshot every text, recording phone calls when I remembered, keeping notes about her questions and comments. Call me paranoid, but something about this whole situation felt calculated. The pressure ramped up over the next 2 weeks. Mom called daily, each conversation steering toward my financial decisions. She'd bring up horror stories about people who'd lost their inheritance money, mention how complicated taxes could be, suggest that someone with my limited experience might benefit from professional guidance. Derek joined the campaign too, texting me articles about investment scams and financial planning mistakes. Real subtle, guys. The weird part was how coordinated it all felt. Like they were working from some kind of script, each taking turns to wear me down from different angles. Mom played the worried mother card, Derek played the concerned brother card, and together they painted a picture of me as someone too naive and inexperienced to handle grown-up money. Have you ever experienced family members working together to manipulate you? It's this creepy feeling of realizing that people you trust have been planning behind your back, treating you like a problem to be solved rather than a person to be respected. Then came the ultimatum disguised as an invitation. Nance, sweetie, I've scheduled that appointment with the financial advisor for next Friday at 2. I went ahead and booked your flight. Derek will pick you up at the airport. We can make a weekend of it, just like old times. She'd booked my flight, without asking, like I was 12 years old going to summer camp. Mom, I didn't agree to come back next weekend. I have work commitments here. Long pause. Then, in a voice I remembered from childhood, the one that meant business. Nance, this is important. Your father's money isn't going to manage itself, and frankly, I'm concerned about some of the choices you're making. If you're not mature enough to handle this responsibly, maybe we need to explore other options. Other options. What the hell did that mean? What other options, Mom? Well, honey, if you're not capable of making sound financial decisions, there might be ways to protect that money until you're ready for it. My hands started shaking. Was she actually threatening some kind of legal action to get control of my inheritance? That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Mom's tone, Derek's sudden interest in my finances, the coordinated pressure campaign. This wasn't about protecting me or helping me make good decisions. This was about control. And I was going to find out exactly what they were planning. I decided to call their bluff. If Mom wanted me to come back for a financial planning meeting, fine. But I wasn't going in blind. First, I contacted a lawyer in Portland, a friend of a friend who specialized in family law and estate issues. I explained the situation: inheritance from my father, pressure from my mother to let her manage it, vague threats about protection if I wasn't responsible enough. Your mother has no legal standing to control money your father left specifically to you, Jennifer told me during our consultation. But families sometimes try creative approaches, like convincing someone to voluntarily put money in a trust or sign over financial power of attorney. That didn't sound good. What should I watch out for? Any paperwork they want you to sign, especially at a bank or lawyer's office. And be careful about signing anything under pressure. Document everything if you can. I booked the flight to Phoenix, but I also made preparations. I set up alerts on all my bank accounts, changed my passwords, and made sure my inheritance money was still sitting safely where Dad's lawyer had transferred it. Everything looked normal, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to go very wrong. Derek picked me up at the airport Friday afternoon, and immediately I noticed he was acting strange. More attentive than usual, asking lots of questions about how I was feeling, whether I'd been stressed lately, if I was sleeping okay. You seem tired, Nance. Are you taking care of yourself? Since when did Derek care about my well-being? This was the same brother who used to put thumbtacks on my desk chair and tell Mom I was lying when I complained about it. I'm fine, Derek, just busy with work. Right, the freelance thing. That must be really stressful, not knowing where your next paycheck is coming from. No wonder you're looking run down. I wasn't looking run down. I was looking like someone who'd spent 3 weeks dealing with manipulative family members. But that was beside the point. When we got to Mom's house, she had clearly prepared for my visit. Fresh flowers in my old room, my favorite dinner cooking, the whole domestic goddess routine. But there was something performative about it, like she was trying to create the perfect setting for whatever she had planned. How was your flight, sweetheart? You look tired. Are you eating enough? You seem thin. There it was again, this sudden concern about my health and well-being, like they were building a narrative about something. I'm fine, Mom. Just excited to learn about financial planning. She beamed at that response. Oh, good. Mr. Henderson is such a knowledgeable man. He's going to help us figure out the best way to protect your father's gift. Us. Protect. The language was all about collective decision-making and defense against some unnamed threat. But the threat wasn't external scammers or bad investments. The threat was my independence. That evening, Mom made my favorite dessert and settled in for what she clearly thought would be a heart-to-heart conversation. Nance, honey, I want you to know that everything Derek and I are doing comes from a place of love. We just want to make sure you're taken care of. I appreciate that, Mom. But I'm 28 years old. I've been taking care of myself for years. I know, sweetie, but this is different. This is real money, life-changing money. And with your situation in Portland, the lifestyle, the uncertainty, we're just worried you might make decisions you'll regret later. My situation, my lifestyle. Always back to my sexuality. Like being gay automatically made me financially irresponsible. What decisions are you worried about me making? She sighed dramatically. Well, for instance, Amy mentioned that women in your community sometimes get talked into supporting partners financially or investing in businesses that aren't really viable. Sometimes people take advantage of generous hearts. I stared at her. Are you seriously suggesting that I'm going to be scammed by lesbians? Don't put words in my mouth, Nance. I'm just saying that emotional decisions and money don't mix well. That's why Mr. Henderson suggested some safeguards. Safeguards. What kind of safeguards? Oh, just standard things. We'll discuss it all tomorrow at the meeting. But I was done waiting for tomorrow. I was done being treated like a child who couldn't be trusted with her own father's gift. And I was definitely done being manipulated by people who claimed to love me while systematically undermining my autonomy. Time to turn the tables. I spent that night doing research instead of sleeping. If Mom and Derek were planning something, I needed to know what legal options they actually had. Turns out, Jennifer had been right. Their options were extremely limited. Unless they could prove I was mentally incompetent, my inheritance was mine to do with as I pleased. But I kept thinking about that phrase Mom had used. Mr. Henderson suggested some safeguards. What kind of safeguards would a financial advisor suggest? And why would they need safeguards for a simple consultation? I decided to do some digging on Mr. Henderson. Found his office website, looked up his credentials, read some reviews. Everything seemed legitimate, but one review caught my attention. Helped our family set up a trust to protect assets from poor decision-making. A trust. That's what they were planning. If Mom could convince me to put my inheritance into some kind of trust with her as the trustee, she'd have control over the money while making it look like she was protecting me. And if I signed willingly, it would be legal even if I had been manipulated into agreeing to it. But she needed my signature to make it work. I texted Jennifer early Saturday morning. Hypothetically, if someone wanted to set up a trust for my inheritance money, would they need my signature? She responded within an hour. Yes, and you'd need to sign in front of a notary or bank official. Be very careful about signing anything you haven't read completely. If you suspect manipulation, document everything. The meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. at First National Bank, not at Mr. Henderson's office. That seemed odd until I realized they'd need a bank official to notarize any documents. They were planning to do this all in one trip. Consultation, paperwork, signatures, done. I decided to be proactive. I called Jennifer back and arranged for her to review any documents before I signed them, even if it meant delaying the meeting. I can't be there in person, she said, but you can photograph anything they want you to sign and send it to me immediately. Don't let them pressure you into signing without legal review. That morning, Mom was in full performance mode. She made a big breakfast, chatted about Dad's favorite pancakes, reminisced about family vacations, classic love-bombing behavior, overwhelming me with affection before making her big ask. I'm so glad we're doing this, honey. Your father would be proud to see us working together to protect his gift. Working together. Protecting his gift. The language was so carefully chosen, designed to make me feel guilty for even questioning their motives. Derek joined us for breakfast, equally cheerful and supportive, though I noticed he seemed nervous about something. He kept checking his phone and glancing at Mom like he was waiting for some kind of signal. You're really going to like Mr. Henderson, Nance. He explained everything to Mom and me yesterday, and it all makes perfect sense. Wait, they'd met with him yesterday? Without me? You already met with him? Just preliminary stuff, Mom said quickly. You know, explaining the situation, going over options. Nothing that affects you directly. Nothing that affects me directly. Except they'd had an entire meeting about my money without including me in the conversation. The drive to the bank was surreal. Mom kept talking about how proud Dad would be, how smart we were being, how this was exactly what a loving family should do in situations like this. Derek nodded along, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. I sat in the back seat feeling like I was being driven to my own execution, but also strangely calm. I had a plan now. When we pulled into the bank parking lot, I saw a man in a suit waiting by the entrance, Mr. Henderson presumably. He looked like exactly the kind of person who would help families protect money from irresponsible adult children. There he is, Mom said brightly. Right on time. Nance, honey, remember that this is all about what's best for you. Try to keep an open mind. I reached for my phone and hit record. Mr. Henderson was everything I'd expected. Expensive suit, firm handshake, the kind of smile that never quite reached his eyes. He guided us to a private office in the bank, complete with a conference table and stacks of paperwork already laid out. Ms. Morrison, he said, gesturing to a chair, your mother has explained your situation, and I think we have some excellent options to ensure your inheritance is protected and grows responsibly. My situation. My mother had explained my situation to a complete stranger without my knowledge or consent. I smiled politely and took the offered seat, positioning my phone on the table so it could pick up the conversation. Before we start, I said sweetly, could you explain exactly what my mother told you about my situation? Mom's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Mr. Henderson consulted his notes. Well, you're a young woman living alone in an expensive city, working in a creative field with irregular income. Your mother expressed concerns about your inexperience with large sums of money and the potential for poor financial decisions. I see. And what kind of protection are you suggesting? Mr. Henderson launched into his presentation, pulling out documents and charts. The basic plan was exactly what I'd suspected. A trust fund with Mom as the primary trustee and Derek as backup. I would receive a monthly allowance, with larger disbursements requiring trustee approval for things like education, housing, or appropriate investments. This way, he explained, your inheritance is protected from poor decisions while still providing you with financial security. And if your circumstances change, if you get married or decide to pursue more stable employment, the trust can be modified accordingly. More stable employment. The conditions for accessing my own father's money were contingent on living a life they approved of. How much would my monthly allowance be? We're thinking $800 should cover your basic needs. $800. In Portland. My rent alone was $1,200. That won't cover my rent. Mr. Henderson, Mom jumped in. Well, honey, that's part of the point. You could move back home or find somewhere more affordable. The trust is designed to encourage responsible choices. Encourage responsible choices. Like moving back in with my manipulative mother and giving up the life I'd built for myself. And who makes the decisions about what constitutes a responsible choice? The trustee, your mother, in consultation with the financial advisor. That's me. Mr. Henderson's smile was getting more condescending by the minute. I looked at the paperwork spread across the table. Legal documents, bank transfer forms, trust agreements, all prepared in advance, all requiring my signature to become effective. This is quite a lot to process, I said slowly. Could I take some time to review everything? Mom's mask slipped completely. Nance, sweetie, Mr. Henderson has taken time out of his weekend to meet with us. The bank is open special just for this appointment. It would be rude to waste everyone's time. Derek leaned forward. Plus, the sooner we get this set up, the sooner your money is protected. What if something happens to it while we're waiting? What could happen to money sitting in my savings account? But I didn't ask because I could see where this was heading. They'd planned this entire scenario to create pressure, to make me feel guilty about inconveniencing people, to rush me into signing before I could think it through. Well, I said, picking up a pen and taking photos of the documents with my phone, I suppose if you've all put this much effort into protecting me. I started texting the photos to Jennifer while Mom and Mr. Henderson exchanged satisfied glances. My phone buzzed with a response. Do not sign. This is financial abuse. Get out now. Actually, I said, setting down the pen, I'd like my attorney to review these documents first. The temperature in the room dropped about 20 degrees. Your attorney? Mom's voice was dangerously quiet. Yes. I consulted with a lawyer before coming here, just to make sure I understood my rights. She's reviewing the paperwork now. At the bank, my mother spoke sweetly. Just sign it, dear, while digging her nails into my thigh. I typed coercion in the transfer's subject line. She was smiling, until she saw who was standing behind her, because my phone was ringing, and Jennifer's voice filled the room through the speaker. Nance, I've reviewed the documents. This trust would give your mother complete control over your inheritance with no oversight. Under no circumstances should you sign anything. If they're pressuring you, you need to leave immediately. Mr. Henderson started gathering the papers. Perhaps we should reschedule when everyone has had time to think more clearly. But Mom wasn't ready to give up. Her nails dug into my thigh under the table as she leaned close and whispered, Just sign it, dear. We can sort out the details later. I looked at her hand on my leg, then at her face, still wearing that sweet smile for Mr. Henderson's benefit. That's when I realized this was never about protecting me. This was about control, pure and simple. I stood up slowly, gathering my things. I think we're done here. The ride back to Mom's house was the most uncomfortable 20 minutes of my life. The silence was thick enough to cut with a knife, and I could feel Mom's rage radiating from the driver's seat like heat from a furnace. Derek kept glancing between us nervously, probably trying to figure out how everything had gone so wrong. He'd been expecting a nice family moment where we all worked together to help me, and instead he'd witnessed his first real glimpse of Mom's true nature. I can't believe you embarrassed me like that, Mom finally said as we pulled into the driveway. Mr. Henderson has been working with our family for years, and you made us look like criminals. Did I? Or did I just refuse to sign away my rights to my own money? She slammed the car door hard enough to rattle the windows. Your rights? Nance, you're 28 years old with no savings, no stable income, and no real plan for the future. How is protecting you from your own poor judgment criminal? We were standing in the driveway now, and I could see neighbors starting to peek through their curtains. Good. Let them witness this. Mom, what's your real financial situation? The question hit her like a slap. What do you mean? I mean, why do you really need control of my inheritance? Because this isn't about protecting me from bad decisions. This is about something else entirely. Derek stepped closer, suddenly paying attention in a way he never had before. What are you talking about, Nance? I looked at him, then back at Mom. Derek, did you know Mom called Dad's lawyer asking specifically about complications with my portion of the inheritance? Did you know she's been getting detailed reports about my life in Portland from cousin Amy? Did you know that trust was designed to force me to move back home and live on $800 a month? Derek's face went pale. Mom, is that true? Don't be ridiculous, Mom snapped, but her voice lacked its usual conviction. I was just trying to understand the situation better. What situation, Mom? My inheritance was straightforward. $50,000 transferred directly to me. What complications could there possibly be? She opened her mouth, then closed it again. For the first time in my life, I'd managed to corner her in a lie she couldn't talk her way out of. Unless, I continued, you were hoping there would be complications, or planning to create some. What do you think will happen next? Will Nance's mother finally come clean about her real motivations, or will she find another way to try and manipulate the situation? Drop your predictions in the comments below. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the scene at the bank. Mom's reaction when I mentioned the lawyer, the way Derek had looked when he started to realize what was really happening. Around midnight, I heard voices downstairs. Mom and Derek were having some kind of heated discussion in the kitchen. I crept to the top of the stairs to listen. Never supposed to be this complicated, Derek was saying. You said it was just about helping her make good choices. It is about helping her. Mom's voice was strained. You don't understand, Derek. If she takes that money to Portland and wastes it, she'll have nothing. No security, no backup plan. At least if it's in a trust, she'll always have something. But $800 a month? Mom, that's not enough to live on anywhere, much less Portland. It's enough if she moves back home where she belongs. There it was. The real plan. Not protecting my money, but using my money to force me back under her control. And what if she doesn't want to move back home? Derek asked quietly. Long pause. Then, she will when she realizes she doesn't have any other choice. I'd heard enough. I went back to my room and started packing. There was no point in staying for the rest of the weekend. I knew everything I needed to know now. But as I folded my clothes, something nagged at me. Mom's desperation at the bank, the pressure to sign immediately, the fact that she'd been planning this since Dad's funeral. It felt like more than just control issues. It felt like urgency, like she needed that money for something specific. I confronted Derek the next morning while Mom was in the shower. He was sitting at the kitchen table, staring into his coffee cup like it held the answers to life's mysteries. Derek, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. He looked up, and I was surprised to see how tired he looked, like he hadn't slept either. Okay. What's Mom's real financial situation? He was quiet for so long I thought he wasn't going to answer. Then, it's not good, Nance. My stomach dropped. How not good? Derek rubbed his face with both hands. After Dad died, I started helping her with the bills and paperwork. That's when I found out about everything. Everything like what? Credit card debt, a lot of it. And she's been borrowing against the house to cover payments. How much debt? Around $40,000. $40,000. Almost exactly what my inheritance was worth. Derek, please tell me she wasn't planning to use my money to pay off her debts. He wouldn't meet my eyes. She said it would just be temporary, like a loan. Once she got things straightened out, she'd pay it back through the trust. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. But looking at those papers yesterday, there was no mechanism for paying anything back, was there? No, he whispered. There wasn't. This put everything in a completely different light. Mom hadn't just been trying to control me, she'd been trying to steal from me to cover her own financial mistakes. All the lectures about responsibility and making smart choices, when she was the one who'd made terrible decisions and needed bailing out. What did she spend $40,000 on? Derek's face crumpled. Some investment thing her friend Margaret got her into. They were buying houses to flip, but the market went bad, and now she's stuck with payments on properties that won't sell. I remembered Margaret, Mom's bridge club friend who always had some new get-rich-quick idea. Dad used to joke that Margaret could sell ice to polar bears, but it wasn't funny anymore. Derek, why didn't you tell me any of this before? He shrugged, looking ashamed. She made me promise not to worry you while you were grieving. Said it would all work out if we just followed the plan. And honestly, I believed her. Mom's always been so good at managing things, at having all the answers. I didn't think she could be wrong about something this big. That was the difference between Derek and me. He'd never learned to question Mom's version of reality. I'd been forced to develop that skill through years of being scapegoated and manipulated. What felt like punishment had actually been preparation. Derek, there's something else. That trust wasn't just about controlling my spending. It was designed to make me so miserable that I'd eventually just give up and let her have everything. What do you mean? I pulled out my phone and showed him the photos I'd taken of the documents. Look at the succession clause. If anything happened to me, you'd inherit everything from the trust. Derek read the section I'd highlighted, his face growing paler by the second. Oh my God. She was setting me up to get your inheritance if I died, or if I got so frustrated with the restrictions that I signed everything over to you to spite her. Either way, Dad's money would end up with the family member who never left Phoenix. We sat in silence, both processing the full scope of what Mom had planned. It wasn't just financial abuse. It was a complete restructuring of Dad's wishes, using legal manipulation to redirect his gift away from me entirely. Nance, I had no idea. I swear to you, I thought we were really helping. I studied his face, looking for signs of deception. But Derek had never been a good liar. That had always been Mom's specialty. I believe you, Derek, but we need to talk about what happens now. What do you mean? I mean, are you going to keep helping her try to manipulate me, or are you going to start thinking for yourself? It was a harsh question, but Derek needed to hear it. He'd spent 31 years being Mom's loyal soldier, and it was time for him to decide whether he wanted to be her victim too. Derek's answer came sooner than I expected. That afternoon, while I was booking my flight back to Portland, he knocked on my bedroom door. Nance, can we talk? I looked up from my laptop. He was holding a manila folder and his hands were shaking slightly. What's that? Financial documents. Mom's financial documents. He sat down heavily on my bed. I've been thinking about everything you said and I realized I needed to see the full picture for myself. My heart started racing. And? It's worse than I told you this morning. He opened the folder and pulled out bank statements, credit card bills, loan documents. The $40,000 in credit card debt? That's just the beginning. I stared at the papers he was spreading across my comforter. How much worse? She owes almost $80,000 total. Credit cards, loans against the house, a business loan for the real estate investments. And Nance? The house payments are 3 months behind. $80,000. No wonder she'd been so desperate to get control of my inheritance. Derek, how long has this been going on? I think it started about a year ago, but it got really bad after Dad's heart attack. The medical bills, the funeral expenses, and then Margaret convinced her that real estate flipping was a quick way to make back what she'd spent. I picked up one of the credit card statements. The minimum payment alone was more than my monthly rent in Portland. How has she been making even the minimum payments? Derek looked ashamed. I've been giving her money. About $1,500 a month. $1,500? Derek, where are you getting that kind of money? I picked up a second job. Night security at an office building. And I took out a personal loan. My brother had been quietly destroying his own financial future to enable Mom's spending and cover her mistakes. No wonder he'd looked so tired and stressed. Derek, you can't keep doing this. She's drowning and she's going to drag you down with her. I know that now, he said quietly. But at the time, she made it sound temporary. She said once she got your inheritance properly managed, she could pay everything back and we'd all be secure. Except my inheritance wouldn't have been nearly enough to cover all this debt. No, it wouldn't have. He pulled out another document. That's why she was also planning to sell Dad's car collection. I felt like he'd punched me. The cars Dad left me? She had them appraised last week. They're worth about $30,000 if she sells them to a collector. So the total plan was to steal my $50,000 in cash, sell my $30,000 in cars, and use Derek's credit to cover the remaining debt. She would have completely erased Dad's gift to me and left Derek financially ruined, all to pay for her own poor decisions. Derek, show me the appraisal. He handed me the document and my blood ran cold. The appraiser's signature looked familiar. Too familiar. Derek, look at this signature. Look at it closely. He studied the paper. It looks like Dad's signature. That's because it is Dad's signature, or Mom's version of it. I pulled out my phone and started taking pictures of all the documents. Derek, I think Mom has been forging Dad's signature on things. Not just this appraisal, but probably other documents too. Derek went very still. What kind of other documents? I don't know yet. But someone who's willing to forge one signature is probably willing to forge others. I looked at him seriously. Derek, I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth. Do you think Mom would have really paid me back if I'd signed that trust? He was quiet for a long moment, staring at the financial documents spread across my bed. Finally, no, I don't think she would have. I think once she had control of your money, she would have found reasons why paying it back would be irresponsible or impossible. And what about you? Do you think she cares about the financial hole she's put you in? Another long pause. I think Mom cares about Mom, and she's really good at making other people's problems sound like their own fault. It was the first time I'd ever heard Derek criticize Mom directly. Maybe there was hope for him after all. Derek, I'm going to ask you to do something, and it's going to be really hard. What? I want you to stop giving her money. I want you to stop enabling this. And I want you to help me figure out what other documents she might have forged. Derek stared at me for a long moment. If I do that, she'll lose the house. Derek, she's going to lose the house anyway. The only question is whether she takes you down with her. He nodded slowly. Okay, what do we do first? The next few hours were like archaeological work, except instead of digging up ancient civilizations, we were digging up layers of Mom's deception. Derek had access to Dad's old filing cabinet, and we went through every document methodically. What we found was disturbing. 3 months before Dad died, someone had signed his name to a home equity loan for $30,000. The signature looked like Dad's, but the handwriting on the application form was definitely Mom's. 2 months before Dad died, someone had signed his name to close out his retirement account early, paying massive penalties to access the cash. Again, Dad's signature, Mom's handwriting. 1 month before Dad died, someone had signed his name to add Mom as a joint owner on his classic car insurance policy, giving her the right to sell the cars without my consent. Derek, Mom didn't just plan to steal my inheritance after Dad died. She was stealing from him while he was alive. Derek looked sick. You think Dad knew? I don't know. Maybe that's why he had that final heart attack. The stress of discovering what she was doing to him. To us. We kept digging. Hidden in the back of the filing cabinet, Derek found something that made my blood run cold. A folder labeled Estate Planning that contained a completely different version of Dad's will. In this version, Dad left me $100,000 and the entire car collection. He left Derek the house and $50,000 in cash. Mom got the life insurance and Dad's personal belongings, but no direct access to the money designated for Derek and me. Derek, this is Dad's original will. The one I saw at the lawyer's office was altered. Derek compared the two documents side by side. Look at the dates. This one is from 6 months before Dad died. The one we saw was supposedly signed 1 month before he died. But look at the signatures. They're identical. Exactly identical. Derek stared at the papers. You can't sign your name exactly the same way twice, can you? Not unless you're tracing it. Derek, I think Mom forged Dad's signature on a completely new will, reducing my inheritance and giving herself more control over the estate. We sat in stunned silence, surrounded by evidence of systematic fraud that had started while Dad was still alive and continued after his death. Mom hadn't just tried to manipulate me. She'd been stealing from our family for months. We have to go to the police, Derek said quietly. Do we? Derek, think about what that means. Mom goes to jail, you lose the house anyway, and our family implodes completely. Nance, she stole from Dad while he was dying. She stole from you. She's been manipulating me into giving her money I don't have. When does it stop? He was right, but I needed to think through all the implications. Okay, but first I want to secure my actual inheritance. If that original will is valid, I should be getting $100,000, not $50,000. How do we do that? We take all of this to an estate attorney, someone who can review the documents and determine which will is legitimate. Derek nodded. And then? Then we decide whether to press charges based on what the lawyer says our options are. I called Jennifer and explained what we'd discovered. She recommended an estate attorney in Phoenix who could meet with us the next day. Nance, this is potentially criminal fraud, but it's also a complex estate matter. You need someone who specializes in contested wills and probate issues. That night, Derek and I agreed to tell Mom we were going out for lunch, but not mention the lawyer's appointment. We needed professional advice before confronting her with what we'd found. But as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, I kept thinking about Dad's last few months. How tired he'd looked. How worried he'd seemed. Had he discovered what Mom was doing? Had he tried to stop her? And if so, had the stress of confronting her betrayal contributed to his heart attack? I was starting to realize that Mom's manipulations might have cost our family more than just money. They might have cost us Dad. The estate attorney, Margaret Hoffman, reviewed our documents for 2 hours before speaking. Derek and I sat in her conference room, watching her face for any indication of what she was thinking. Finally, she looked up. This is one of the most systematic cases of estate fraud I've seen. Your mother didn't just forge your father's signature, she created an entirely fictitious will and used it to redirect his assets. Is the original will valid? I asked. Yes, absolutely. The original will is properly witnessed, notarized, and consistent with your father's previous estate planning documents. The altered will has numerous problems: incorrect witness signatures, suspicious date changes, and most obviously, forged signatures. Derek leaned forward. What does that mean for Nance's inheritance? It means Nance is entitled to the full $100,000 plus the car collection, as specified in the legitimate will. The $50,000 she received was based on fraudulent documents. I felt a mix of relief and anger. Relief that I was getting what Dad actually wanted me to have, and anger that Mom had stolen $50,000 from me, and almost gotten away with it. What about the other documents we found? Derek asked. Ms. Hoffman's expression grew grave. The home equity loan, the retirement account withdrawal, the insurance changes, all of these appeared to be forgeries accomplished while your father was still alive. This isn't just estate fraud. It's financial elder abuse. Could that have affected his health? I asked quietly. Financial stress, especially the discovery of spousal betrayal, can absolutely contribute to cardiac events in vulnerable individuals. If your father discovered what your mother was doing, she trailed off diplomatically. Derek and I exchanged glances. We were both thinking the same thing. Ms. Hoffman, what are our options here? I asked. You have several choices. You can pursue civil remedies to recover the stolen funds and correct the estate distribution. You can file criminal complaints for fraud and elder abuse, or you can seek a combination of both civil and criminal justice. What would you recommend? That depends on your goals. Do you want to recover your father's assets and prevent future fraud? Do you want to see your mother face criminal consequences? Do you want to protect Derek from further financial manipulation? I looked at Derek. What do you think? Derek was quiet for a long moment. I think Dad deserves justice. And I think Mom needs to face consequences for what she's done. Not just to us, but to him. Okay, let's pursue both civil and criminal options. Ms. Hoffman nodded. I'll prepare the necessary paperwork to contest the will and recover the stolen assets. I'll also put you in touch with a prosecutor who specializes in elder abuse cases. 2 days later, Derek and I sat across from Detective Morrison and Assistant District Attorney Sarah Chen. We'd brought copies of all the forged documents, the financial records showing Mom's debts, and the evidence of systematic fraud. This is a strong case, Ada Chen said after reviewing everything. Your mother committed multiple felonies over an extended period. The evidence is clear and well documented. What kind of consequences would she face? Derek asked. Multiple counts of fraud, forgery, and elder abuse. We're looking at significant jail time, restitution requirements, and permanent restrictions on her ability to handle financial matters. Derek looked pale. How long would the process take? Several months for the criminal case, potentially longer for the civil recovery. But we can move quickly to secure your father's assets and prevent your mother from disposing of any remaining evidence. That afternoon, Detective Morrison served Mom with a search warrant. Derek and I waited in a coffee shop down the street while police officers searched the house for additional evidence. My phone rang. It was Detective Morrison. Ms. Morrison, we found something you need to know about. Your mother had been researching ways to have you declared mentally incompetent. She had printed articles about conservatorship laws, forms for psychiatric evaluations, and notes about building a case for financial incapacity. My blood ran cold. She was planning to have me declared incompetent? It appears so. The note suggests she was going to argue that your lifestyle choices and financial inexperience made you unable to manage large sums of money. If I hadn't refused to sign that trust, if I hadn't brought my lawyer into the situation, Mom would have moved to the next phase of her plan. She would have tried to have me declared legally incompetent, giving her permanent control over my inheritance and potentially my entire life. Detective, there's something else. My mother has been receiving detailed information about my life in Portland from my cousin Amy. If she was planning to build a competency case, she might have been documenting things for months. We'll look into that. Ms. Morrison, you did the right thing by standing up to her. If you'd signed those documents, it would have been much harder to protect yourself legally. When Derek and I returned to the house, Mom was sitting in the living room with her attorney, looking defeated for the first time in my life. Nance, she said as we walked in, we need to talk. Actually, Mom, I think we're past talking. It's time for you to face the consequences of what you've done. She looked at me with something I'd never seen before. Genuine fear. She'd spent so many years controlling everyone around her that she'd forgotten what it felt like to be powerless. "I was trying to protect you," she said weakly. "No, Mom. You were trying to steal from me. From Dad. From Derek. You were trying to destroy our family to cover your own mistakes." Her lawyer whispered something in her ear. She nodded slowly. "I'm prepared to make a deal," her lawyer announced. "Full restitution, cooperation with the estate correction, and a guilty plea to reduce charges in exchange for a lighter sentence." I looked at Derek, then back at Mom. "What do you think, Derek?" "I think justice isn't about revenge. It's about making sure this never happens again." He was right. The goal wasn't to destroy Mom. It was to protect ourselves and honor Dad's actual wishes. "We'll consider the plea deal," I said. "But there are going to be conditions." 6 months later, I was sitting in my new home office in Portland, looking out at the garden I'd planted with some of my inheritance money. The house was small but perfect. 2 bedrooms, a studio space for my design work, and enough room for the classic car collection Dad had left me. The legal process had taken longer than expected, but the resolution was fair. Mom pleaded guilty to multiple counts of fraud and elder abuse, receiving 3 years of probation, restitution requirements, and mandatory financial counseling. She'd lost the Phoenix house but avoided jail time. More importantly, Dad's original will had been validated. I received the full $100,000 he'd intended for me, plus the cars he'd specifically wanted me to have. Derek got his $50,000 and the family photos and personal items Dad had set aside for him. The money had changed my life in ways I'd never expected. Not just the financial security, but the validation of Dad's faith in me. He'd believed I could handle independence and responsibility, and he'd been right. I'd used part of the inheritance to expand my freelance business into a full design agency, focusing on helping small businesses build their brands. The rest was invested conservatively, earning interest while giving me the freedom to take creative risks without worrying about rent money. Derek had moved to Portland too, using his inheritance to start fresh in a city where Mom's influence couldn't reach him. He'd started therapy and was slowly learning to make decisions based on his own judgment rather than family pressure. "I keep thinking about what would have happened if you'd signed those papers," he said during one of our weekly dinners. "I'd probably be living in Mom's basement, getting an allowance like a teenager and watching my dreams disappear one $800 payment at a time. And I'd still be working 2 jobs to cover her debt, thinking it was normal family loyalty." We'd both learned important lessons about the difference between love and manipulation, between protection and control. Real love trusts you to make good decisions and supports you when you make mistakes. Real love doesn't try to reshape you into someone more convenient to manage. Mom still called occasionally, usually when she needed something. I'd developed a skill Dad would have been proud of: the ability to listen politely and then say no without guilt or explanation. The most important thing I'd learned was that standing up for yourself isn't selfish. It's necessary. Family loyalty shouldn't require sacrificing your autonomy, and love shouldn't come with conditions that diminish who you are. I'd started a blog about financial abuse and family manipulation, sharing my story and resources for others in similar situations. The response had been overwhelming. Hundreds of people reached out to share their own experiences with family members who used money as a weapon of control. "Thank you for showing me that I wasn't crazy," one woman wrote. "My family had me convinced that questioning their financial help made me ungrateful and selfish." Another message said, "Your story gave me the courage to hire my own lawyer when my relatives tried to pressure me into signing over my house." The blog had grown into a support community, then into a nonprofit organization, providing resources and legal assistance for people experiencing financial abuse from family members. It wasn't something I'd planned, but it felt like a natural extension of Dad's gift, using my independence to help others find their own. On the anniversary of Dad's death, Derek and I took one of his classic cars for a drive through the Oregon mountains. It was a beautiful day, and I could almost feel Dad's presence in the rumble of the engine and the wind through the windows. "Do you think he knew?" Derek asked as we pulled over at a scenic overlook. "About what Mom was planning?" "I think he suspected something. That's why he made sure his real will was so clear about what he wanted for us. And why he gave you enough money to be truly independent." I nodded. Dad understood that sometimes protecting someone means giving them the tools to protect themselves, not controlling their choices. We stood at the overlook, looking out at the mountains and valleys below. It was the kind of view that puts everything in perspective. Problems that seemed enormous from up close became manageable from a distance. "You know what the strangest part is?" I said. "What?" "I'm grateful it happened. Not for the fraud or the manipulation, but for the lesson. If Mom hadn't tried to steal my inheritance, I might never have learned how strong I could be. I might have spent my whole life seeking approval from people who were never going to give it freely. Derek smiled. Dad would be proud of who you've become. He'd be proud of who we've both become. As we drove back toward Portland, I thought about the scared 28-year-old who'd sat in that bank conference room 6 months ago, watching her mother try to steal her future. That woman felt like a different person now. Not because I'd changed fundamentally, but because I'd finally learned to trust my own judgment and stand up for my own worth. The inheritance Dad left me wasn't just money. It was permission to live life on my own terms. And that gift, more than any dollar amount, had set me free. If this story resonated with you, make sure to like and subscribe for more stories about overcoming family manipulation and finding your own strength. Remember, you don't owe anyone your independence no matter what they call it. Real family supports your growth. They don't try to control it. Sometimes the greatest act of love is trusting someone to live their own life, even when you don't understand their choices. Dad understood that. It just took me a while to learn it myself.